When you discover that your fated mate bond, the one thing every Omega dreams of, prays for, builds her entire existence around, is nothing but a cosmic joke played by cruel gods, the pain doesn't just cut. It eviscerates. It reaches into your chest with clawed fingers, wraps around your still-beating heart, and squeezes until you're certain the organ will burst through your ribs for everyone to see. That's how Naira's story begins. Hello, everyone. Before we dive into tonight's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic tales of passion, power, and forbidden love. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Thank you so much. Now, let's return to our story. The day Castian rejected her in front of the entire Varcro's court was the day fate proved itself a liar, a trickster, a malevolent force disguised in whispered promises and childhood fairy tales. She'd been raised on those promises since before she could shift. Stories passed from mother to daughter like sacred heirlooms. Tales of fated mates whose souls recognized each other across crowded rooms, of Omegas cherished and protected by their destined alphas, of bonds so sacred that even death couldn't sever them. Growing up in the cramped quarters of the lower district, sharing a single room with her mother and two younger sisters, those stories had been her only escape. Naira had clung to the foolish hope that her beauty, the curves that made men stare, the moonlit skin that seemed to glow even in darkness, the full lips that drew eyes like moss aflame, would matter when her mate finally found her, that the fire burning in her soul would be seen as passion rather than defiance. But hope was a treacherous thing, as it turned out, because when it's finally crushed, publicly, viciously, with hundreds watching your humiliation, you suffer not just rejection, but the ache of having dared to believe you deserved love at all. The great hall of Varcro soared 60 feet overhead, marble columns veined with gold supporting crystal chandeliers that cast rainbow fragments across the obsidian floor. Every noble family, every powerful alpha, every eligible beta, and Omega had gathered for the spring-claiming ceremony. Naira stood among 24 Omegas near the eastern wall. The others trembled like autumn leaves, eyes downcast, shoulders curved in perfect submission. They wore soft pastels, blush pink, powder blue, gentle lavender. Naira wore crimson. The gown clung to her curves like a lover's hands, cupping the generous swell of her breasts, cinching at her narrow waist, flowing over hips that swayed when she walked. Crimson was scandalous for an Omega. It was a shade of alpha aggression, of passion that refused to be tamed. She'd worn it anyway. "She's here," someone whispered. "The curse bless one. Too beautiful for her station," another agreed. "That body could tempt a saint. No proper alpha would want her. Look at her eyes. There's no submission there." Naira kept her head high. Let them whisper. Their words were nothing but wind against stone. At 23, she was considered dangerously past prime mating age. Her continued unmated status was whispered about as either tragedy or curse. The truth was simpler. She refused every alpha who wanted to own her body and break her spirit, waiting for something she couldn't name, waiting for her fated mate. The fool. The moment Castian Thornwood entered the great hall, Naira felt the air shift like lightning striking nearby. Her heart lurched into an uneven rhythm. Her skin flushed hot, then cold, and her wolf went absolutely still. Mate. The word echoed through her entire being. Mate, mate, mate. Castian was everything an alpha-born beta should be. Over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and a warrior's build. Auburn hair shot through with gold. Striking green eyes. A confident smile of a man who had never doubted his place. He was heir to the Thornwood Pack, one of the most powerful beta families in Varcro's. He was perfect when his green eyes locked onto Naira's amber gaze. She felt the mate bond snap into place like a key turning in a lock that had waited a lifetime. Yes, her wolf howled. He is ours. Finally, OURS. For one beautiful moment, Naira believed in fairy tales again. Then she saw the woman at his side. Ilera Voss was everything Naira was not. Small and delicate with porcelain skin and pale blonde hair. Soft gray eyes, a modest pink gown, graceful movements. Her hand rested on Castian's arm with the ease of long familiarity. Castian's eyes found Naira again, and she saw it, recognition alongside something that made her blood freeze. Disgust. The herald's voice boomed through the hall. Any who wish to declare their intended mates, please step forward. Castian stepped forward. I, Castian Thornwood, heir to the Thornwood pack. He paused, his cold green eyes finding Naira in the crowd. Hereby reject the mate bond of the Omega known as Naira of No House. Silence. Devastating, absolute silence. The bond between them strained, thinned, and began to tear. The pain was indescribable. It started in her chest where the golden thread connecting them stretched to its breaking point. Then it spread. Stomach, throat, head, limbs. Every nerve caught fire. Her wolf screamed, thrashing in desperate agony. Naira's knees buckled. She crashed to the obsidian floor. Hands pressed against her chest as if she could hold her heart together. Through the haze of agony, she heard Castian continue. I reject this bond because I do not accept an Omega who does not know her place. Beauty without submission is worthless. Fire without control is merely destruction. He turned to Alara. Instead, I choose Alara Voss as my intended mate. She is everything an Omega should be: gentle, obedient, pure. Applause. There was actually applause. Get up. Something deep inside her command. Do not let them see you crawl. She planted her hands on the floor, forced herself to her knees, then her feet. She stood. The applause faded as a rejected Omega rose like a phoenix. Her gown was rumpled, her face pale with pain, but her eyes burned. Keep your chosen mate, Castian Thornwood, Naira said, her voice carrying through the hall. May she give you the submissive, boring life you deserve. But know this, you had something rare, something precious, and you threw it away because you were too small to hold it. She leaned closer, her whisper somehow still carrying. That is not my failure. It's yours. Then she turned and walked out. Outside, the night air hit her like a blow. Only when she was alone did she let herself feel it. The sobs came, deep, wrenching cries that tore from her throat. She slid down the cold stone wall, her crimson dress ruined, her armor finally cracking. When the tears stopped, she lifted her head to the indifferent silver moon. I don't need you, she whispered. I don't need any of you. She pushed herself to her feet. Her body ached. Her heart was raw, but she was standing, alive. I will never let another control my fate, she vowed. I will never give anyone the power to break me again. I am Naira, and I have no house. I am curse-blessed and too beautiful and too defiant. And someday they will all remember this night. Not as the night I was broken, but at night I began to burn. 3 months after the rejection, Naira had learned that survival tasted like swallowed pride and sleepless nights. She'd fled Varkros a morning after the ceremony, unable to bear the whispers that followed her to the lower district like hungry shadows. Did you hear? The curse-blessed one was rejected publicly. Even her fated mate didn't want her. The words cut deeper than any blade. Now she lived in Thornhaven, a small village on the outskirts of the kingdom where no one knew her name or her shame. She worked as a healer's assistant, grinding herbs and mixing poultices for copper coins that barely covered her room at the widow's boarding house. It wasn't much of a life, but it was hers. Naira, I need more feverfew from the eastern meadow. Old Mira called from inside the cottage. The miller's wife is expecting, and her headaches are worsening. I'll go now, Naira replied, grabbing her gathering basket. Before the light fades. The eastern meadow lay beyond the village boundary, a rolling expanse of wildflowers that bordered the dark tree-line of Ashwood Forest. Naira knew she shouldn't venture so close to the forest alone. Slavers had been spotted in the region, hunting for unclaimed Omegas to sell at the illegal moon auctions. But fever only grew near the forest's edge, and Naira had stopped being afraid of monsters 3 months ago. The worst one had already found her in that glittering great hall, wearing a handsome face and speaking rejection like poetry. She was kneeling among the white-flowered plants when she heard the first twig snap. Her wolf stirred instantly, hackles rising. Danger. Naira's hand moved slowly toward a small knife tucked in her boot. "I know you're there," she called, keeping her voice steady. "Show yourselves." Laughter, low, cruel, hungry. 3 men emerged from the tree lean. They were rough-looking, scarred, their eyes gleaming with a particular greed that Naira had learned to recognize. Slavers. Well, the largest one said, his gaze crawling over her body like insects. "Look what we found, boys. An unclaimed Omega all alone in the meadow." "I'm not unclaimed," Naira lied, rising to her feet. "My alpha is expecting me back. No mark on that pretty neck says otherwise." The slaver grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. "You know what unclaimed Omegas fetch at the moon auction? Especially ones built like you." He gestured at her curves, her breasts straining against her simple dress, her hips that no amount of modest clothing could hide. "A fortune," he finished. "Absolute fortune." Naira's knife was in her hand before he finished speaking. She lunged. The first slaver went down with a slash across his forearm, howling in surprise. The second caught her elbow to his throat. But the third, the largest one, was faster than he looked. His fist connected with her temple, and the world exploded into stars. She fought through the dizziness, scratching, biting, kicking. She felt her nails rake down someone's cheek, heard a satisfying grunt of pain. But there were too many, and she was too small, and eventually a rag pressed against her nose flooded her senses with something sweet and chemical. "No!" Her wolf howled as darkness crept in. "No, no, and no." The last thing she heard was a large slaver's voice, thick with grudging respect. "This one's got fire. She'll fetch double." Naira woke in a gilded cage. The irony wasn't lost on her. Gold bars instead of iron, silk cushions instead of straw, but a cage nonetheless. She pressed her fingers against the metal, testing its strength, and found it unyielding. "Don't bother." The voice came from the cage beside hers. A young Omega, barely 18, with tear-streaked cheeks and terrified eyes. "I already tried. The bars are reinforced with wolfsbane. Weakens our strength." Naira's wolf confirmed it. She felt sluggish, diminished, her usual fire banked to embers. "Where are we?" Naira asked. "The holding house. For the moon auction." The girl's voice cracked. "They're going to sell us. Like cattle. Like we're nothing." Naira looked around. Dozens of cages filled a massive chamber, each containing an Omega in various states of despair. Some wept. Some stared blankly. Some had clearly given up entirely. "What's your name?" Naira asked the young girl. "Lila." "Listen to me, Lila." Naira's voice was firm despite her own fear. "You are not cattle. You are not nothing. Whatever happens tonight, you remember that. They can cage our bodies, but they cannot cage our souls. Not unless we let them." Lila's tears slowed slightly. "How can you be so calm?" Naira laughed bitterly. "I'm not calm. I'm furious. And fury is just fear that's learned to bite back." Hours later, handlers arrived to prepare them for sale. Naira was dragged from her cage and taken to a bathing chamber, where rough hands scrubbed her skin until it glowed. They oiled her hair until it shone like black silk. They dressed her in scraps of fabric that barely covered her most intimate areas, designed to display her body like merchandise. Because that's what she was now. Merchandise. "This one's premium," a handler noted, circling her with clinical appreciation. "Look at those curves, those breeding hips, that face." "The fire in her eyes will be a problem," another warned. "Rich alphas like spirit until they don't. Then she'll learn. They all learn eventually." Naira said nothing, but inside, her wolf was memorizing every face, every exit, every weakness in their operation. "Someday," she promised herself, "someday I will burn this place to ground." The auction hall was obscene in its opulence. Crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, wealthy alphas and betas seated in comfortable chairs, while Omegas were paraded before them like prize horses. Naira watched from behind the stage curtain as one girl after another was sold. The bids flew fast and furious. Pretty Omegas fetched high prices. Submissive ones fetched higher. The ones who cried fetched highest of all, apparently. Some alphas enjoy breaking spirits that were already fractured. Then it was Naira's turn. She was pushed onto the stage, the silk cloak barely covering her curves. The spotlight hit her, and she heard the collective intake of breath from the audience. Lot 23, the auctioneer announced. Unclaimed Omega, age 23. Premium breeding stock. Note the exceptional physical attributes. Naira turned out as degrading inventory of her body. Instead, she scanned the crowd, her wolf alert despite the wolf's bane still weakening her system. Wealthy alphas leered from their seats. Gold chains glittered on fat fingers. Hungry eyes devoured her curves like she was a feast laid out for their consumption. Bidding erupted immediately. 5,000 gold. 7,000. 10,000. Look at those hips. She'll bear strong pups. Naira's stomach churned with revulsion. And then silence. The bidding stopped. The crowd parted. Even the auctioneer's voice died in his throat. A figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the hall, tall as death itself, shoulders broad enough to block out light, silver-gray eyes like winter storms, a face carved from cruelty and beauty in equal measure, with scars visible on his hands that spoke of violence survived. Alpha King Draven Kaler, the most feared ruler in all the kingdoms, had entered an illegal slave auction. His eyes locked onto Naira, onto her defiant stance, her burning amber gaze, her body displayed like a prize, but her spirit utterly unbroken. The crowd held its breath. And then the king spoke, his voice cold as frozen iron. Clear the room. Everyone fled. Naira stood alone on that stage of shame, facing the monster of legend. His silver eyes traced every curve of her body, every defiant line of her stance. Then he spoke 5 words that would reshape destiny. Tonight, I will make you mine. 3 months after the rejection, Naira had learned that survival tasted like swallowed pride and sleepless nights. She'd fled Varkros the morning after the ceremony, unable to bear the whispers that followed her through the lower district like hungry shadows. Did you hear? The curse-blessed one was rejected publicly. Even her fated mate didn't want her. The words cut deeper than any blade. Now she lived in Thornhaven, a small village on the outskirts of the kingdom where no one knew her name or her shame. She worked as a healer's assistant, grinding herbs and mixing poultices for copper coins that barely covered a room at the widow's boarding house. It wasn't much of a life, but it was hers. Naira, I need more feverfew from the Eastern Meadow. Old Mira called from inside the cottage. The miller's wife is expecting, and her headaches are worsening. I'll go now, Naira replied, grabbing her gathering basket. Before the light fades. The Eastern Meadow lay beyond the village boundary, a rolling expanse of wildflowers that bordered the dark tree-line of Ashwood Forest. Naira knew she shouldn't venture so close to the forest alone. Slavers had been spotted in the region, hunting for unclaimed omegas to sell at the illegal moon auctions. But fever only grew near the forest's edge, and Naira had stopped being afraid of monsters 3 months ago. The worst one had already found her in that glittering great hall, wearing a handsome face and speaking rejection like poetry. She was kneeling among the white-flowered plants when she heard the first twig snap. Her wolf stirred instantly, hackles rising. Danger. Naira's hand moved slowly toward the small knife tucked in her boot. I know you're there, she called, keeping her voice steady. Show yourselves. Laughter, low, cruel, hungry. 3 men emerged from the tree-line. They were rough-looking, scarred, their eyes gleaming with particular greed that Naira had learned to recognize. Slavers. Well, the largest one said, his gaze crawling over her body like insects. Look what we found, boys. An unclaimed omega, all alone in the meadow. I'm not unclaimed, Naira lied, rising to her feet. My alpha is expecting me back. No mark on that pretty neck says otherwise. The slaver grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. You know what unclaimed omegas fetch at the moon auction? Especially ones built like you. He gestured at her curves, her breasts straining against her simple dress, her hips that no amount of modest clothing could hide. A fortune, he finished. Absolute fortune. Naira's knife was in her hand before he finished speaking. She lunged. The first slaver went down with a slash across his forearm, howling in surprise. The second caught her elbow to his throat. But the third, the largest one, was faster than he looked. His fist connected with her temple, and the world exploded into stars. She fought through the dizziness, scratching, biting, kicking. She felt her nails rake down someone's cheek, heard a satisfying grunt of pain. But there were too many, and she was too small, and eventually a rag pressed against her nose flooded her senses with something sweet and chemical. No, her wolf howled as darkness crept in. No, no, and oh. The last thing she heard was a large slaver's voice, thick with grudging respect. This one's got fire. She'll fetch double. Naira woke in a gilded cage. The irony wasn't lost on her. Gold bars instead of iron, silk cushions instead of straw, but a cage nonetheless. She pressed her fingers against the metal, testing its strength, and found it unyielding. Don't bother. The voice came from the cage beside hers. A young Omega, barely 18, with tear-streaked cheeks and terrified eyes. I already tried. The bars are reinforced with wolf's bane. Weakens our strength. Naira's wolf confirmed it. She felt sluggish, diminished, her usual fire banked to embers. Where are we? Naira asked. The holding house. For the moon auction. The girl's voice cracked. They're going to sell us. Like cattle. Like we're nothing. Naira looked around. Dozens of cages filled a massive chamber, each containing an Omega in various states of despair. Some wept. Some stared blankly. Some had clearly given up entirely. What's your name? Naira asked the young girl. Lila. Listen to me, Lila. Naira's voice was firm despite her own fear. You are not cattle. You are not nothing. Whatever happens tonight, you remember that. They can cage our bodies, but they cannot cage our souls. Not unless we let them. Lila's tears slowed slightly. How can you be so calm? Naira laughed bitterly. I'm not calm. I'm furious. And fury is just fear that's learned to bite back. Hours later, handlers arrived to prepare them for sale. Naira was dragged from her cage and taken to a bathing chamber, where rough hands scrubbed her skin until it glowed. They oiled her hair until it shone like black silk. They dressed her in scraps of fabric that barely covered her most intimate areas, designed to display her body like merchandise. Because that's what she was now. Merchandise. This one's premium, a handler noted, circling her with clinical appreciation. Look at those curves. Those breeding hips. That face. The fire in her eyes will be a problem, another warned. Rich alpha is like spirit. Until they don't. Then she'll learn. They all learn eventually. Naira said nothing. But inside, her wolf was memorizing every face, every exit, every weakness in their operation. Someday, she promised herself, someday I will burn this place to the ground. The auction hall was obscene in its opulence. Crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, wealthy alphas and betas seated in comfortable chairs, while omegas were paraded before them like prize horses. Naira watched from behind the stage curtain as one girl after another was sold. The bids flew fast and furious. Pretty omegas fetched high prices. Submissive ones fetched higher. The ones who cried fetched highest of all, apparently. Some alphas enjoyed breaking spirits that were already fractured. Then it was Naira's turn. She was pushed onto the stage, the silk cloak barely covering her curves. The spotlight hit her, and she heard the collective intake of breath from the audience. Lot 23, the auctioneer announced. Unclaimed Omega, age 23. Premium breeding stock. Note the exceptional physical attributes. Naira turned out his degrading inventory of her body. Instead, she scanned the crowd, her wolf alert despite the wolf's bane still weakening her system. Wealthy alphas leered from their seats. Gold chains glittered on fat fingers. Hungry eyes devoured her curves like she was a feast laid out for their consumption. Bidding erupted immediately. 5,000 gold. 7,000. 10,000. Look at those hips. She'll bear strong pups. Naira's stomach churned with revulsion. And then silence. The bidding stopped. The crowd parted. Even the auctioneer's voice died in his throat. A figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the hall. Tall as death itself. Shoulders broad enough to block out light. Silver-gray eyes like winter storms. a face carved from cruelty and beauty in equal measure, with scars visible on his hands that spoke of violence survived. Alpha King Draven Kaler, the most feared ruler in all the kingdoms, had entered an illegal slave auction. His eyes locked onto Naira, onto her defiant stance, her burning amber gaze, her body displayed like a prize, but her spirit utterly unbroken. The crowd held its breath, and then the king spoke, his voice cold as frozen iron. "Clear the room." Everyone fled. Naira stood alone on that stage of shame, facing the monster of legend. His silver eyes traced every curve of her body, every defiant line of her stance. Then he spoke 5 words that would reshape destiny. "Tonight, I will make you mine." The silence that followed King Draven's declaration was absolute, the kind of silence that preceded storms, the kind that made prey freeze before predators struck. Naira's heart hammered against her ribs, but she refused to let her fear show. She'd stood before one powerful man who thought he could break her. She would not crumble before another. "Make me yours." She forced her voice to remain steady, even as her wolf cowered deep within her chest. "I wasn't aware kings shop for their bedwarmers at illegal slave auctions." Something flickered in those silver eyes. Surprise? Amusement? It vanished too quickly to name. Draven ascended the stage steps with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known what it meant to be hunted. Up close, he was even more terrifying and more beautiful. His features were sharp enough to cut all hard angles and shadow planes. A thin scar bisected his left eyebrow, disappearing into his hairline. Another curved along his jaw like a crescent moon. He stopped mere inches from her, close enough that she could smell him. Pine and smoke and something darker, wilder, something that made her wolf stir, despite the wolf's bane still clouding her senses. "You speak boldly for someone standing half-naked on an auction block," he observed. His voice was deep, rumbling like distant thunder. "Would you prefer I weep and beg?" Naira lifted her chin. "Sorry to disappoint, but I've already used my tears this year. They were wasted on someone far less impressive than you." Draven's eyes narrowed slightly, reading something in her words. The Thornwood rejection. I've heard the tale. Of course he had. Everyone had. Then you know I'm cursed goods. Naira spread her arms, the silk cloak parting to reveal more of her body than she would have liked. She refused to show shame. Rejected by my own fated mate. Surely the mighty Alpha King can afford untarnished merchandise. I don't want to be untarnished. Draven's gaze traveled down her body slowly, deliberately, not with the hungry lust of the auction bidders, but with something more assessing, more dangerous. "I want fire. And you, little Omega, burn brighter than anyone I've seen in decades." Naira's breath caught despite herself. "What do you actually want from me?" she demanded. Instead of answering, Draven removed his cloak, a heavy thing of black wool lined with silver fur, and draped it around her shoulders. The sudden warmth was jarring, the unexpected gentleness. Even more so. "You're shivering," he said simply. She hadn't realized she was. "That doesn't answer my question." Draven turned away from her, surveying the empty auction hall with evident disgust. "This operation has been a thorn in my kingdom's side for 3 years. I've been hunting its masters, waiting for the right moment to strike. And tonight was that moment. Tonight, I received word that they'd captured something interesting." His silver eyes found hers again. An Omega who fought back, who drew blood from 3 trained slavers, who stood in a cage full of broken spirits and told a frightened girl that her soul could not be caged. Naira's blood ran cold. "You were watching? I have eyes everywhere." Draven's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. The handlers were correct. Rich alphas do enjoy spirit, but most want to break it. I want to forget it. Forge it into what? Something useful. Before Naira could respond, the doors to the auction hall burst open. A squadron of soldiers in black and silver armor flooded in, their movements precise and deadly. "Your Majesty," the lead soldier, a severe-looking woman with close-cropped hair, bowed sharply. "The perimeter is secured. We've captured 12 slavers, including the ringleaders. The holding cells have been opened. The healer corps is attending to the Omegas now. The young one, Naira found herself saying, Lila, she needs. She will receive the same care as all the others. Draven cut in. My soldiers have orders to treat every victim with dignity. He glanced at her sideways. You find that surprising? I find everything about tonight surprising. The soldier, Commander, Naira realized, noting the insignia on her armor, was studying Naira with open curiosity. Is this the one you spoke of, Your Majesty? Commander Sarah, meet Naira of No House. Draven's introduction was dry. She will be returning to the capital with us. I haven't agreed to anything, Naira interjected. Both of them looked at her as if she'd sprouted a second head. Little Omega, Draven said slowly, you have two choices. Return to the village where slavers found you once and will find you again, or come to the capital where you will be housed, fed, and given the opportunity to become something other than prey. And in exchange? In exchange, you will work for me. Doing what exactly? That not-quite smile returned. Whatever I require. Naira's wolf growled low in her chest. The answer was too vague, too open to interpretation. That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll receive tonight. Draven turned toward the doors. The journey to the capital takes 4 days. That should give you adequate time to ask questions, and me adequate time to decide how many I'll answer. He paused at the threshold, looking back over his shoulder. Or you can stay here, tend your herbs, wait for the next group of slavers to find you. His silver eyes gleamed. But we both know you're not foolish enough to choose the cage over the fire. Damn him for being right. Naira clutched his cloak tighter around her shoulders. This cloak that smelled of him, that was warmer than anything she'd worn in months, that felt like both protection and possession. If I come with you, she said carefully, I want your word that I'll be free to leave if your opportunity turns out to be another form of slavery. Draven's expression didn't change. You have it. And I want to see Lila before we go, to make sure she's truly being cared for. A pause. Then, impossibly, a flicker of approval in those cold eyes. Commander Sarah will escort you to the healer's tents. He inclined his head slightly. You have 1 hour, little flame. Then we rode to Shadowvale. He swept out of the hall, his soldiers parting before him like water before a blade. Naira stood alone on the stage, wrapped in a monster's cloak, staring after a king who had just upended everything she thought she knew about survival. What have I just agreed to? Her wolf whispered. I don't know, Naira admitted, but it's better than dying in a meadow. Is it? She had no answer. The healer's tents glowed with warm lantern light against the darkness of night. Inside, Naira found Lila wrapped in blankets, a cup of steaming tea clutched in her trembling hands. The young Omega's eyes widened when she saw Naira approach. You're alive, Lila breathed. When the king cleared the room, we all thought, that he'd purchased me for his bed. Naira settled beside her on the cot. The night is still young, but for now I'm unharmed. Lila glanced around nervously, lowering her voice. They say he's a monster, the bloodied king, that he killed his own father to take the throne, that his castle is built on bones. Naira had heard the same stories. Everyone had. King Draven Kaler had claimed his throne 15 years ago in a coup that left half the royal family dead. His reign had been marked by ruthless efficiency, crushing rebellions without mercy, expanding his borders through conquest, executing traitors in public squares. But monsters didn't free slaves. Monsters didn't order their soldiers to treat victims with dignity. Did they? What will you do now? Naira asked, changing the subject. The commander, the scary woman with the short hair, says they'll transport us to a sanctuary in the capital, that we'll be given food and shelter while we recover, that no one will force us into anything. Lila's voice wavered between hope and disbelief. Do you think it's true? I think. Naira paused, considering her words. I think we both learned that promises are cheap, but action is different. And tonight, I saw soldiers treating Omegas like people instead of property. That counts for something. Lila grabbed her hand, suddenly. Come with us. To the sanctuary. You could heal there too. The offer was tempting. Safe, predictable, and entirely wrong. I can't. Naira squeezed her hand gently. The king has other plans for me. Plans. Fear flickered in Lila's eyes. What kind of plans? The kind I intend to discover before they discover me. Naira rose, pulling the black cloak tighter. Stay strong, little one. Remember what I told you about your soul. Lila nodded, tears threatening again. They can't cage unless I let them. Exactly. Naira touched her cheek briefly. Survive, Lila. Whatever it takes. Survive. She left before her own emotions could betray her. The king's traveling party consisted of 50 soldiers, 12 horses, and 3 covered carriages, one of which, Naira was informed, had been prepared for her. She stared at it with open suspicion. Problem? Commander Sarah appeared at her elbow, her expression unreadable. I expected chains, a prisoner's wagon, perhaps a muzzle if His Majesty was feeling creative. The commander's lips twitched, the closest thing to amusement Naira had seen from her. The king does not travel with prisoners, only servants, soldiers, and guests. And which am I? That remains to be determined. Sarah opened the carriage door, revealing a plush interior with velvet seats and fur blankets. His Majesty will ride alongside the caravan. If you require anything during the journey, signal the driver. It felt like a trap. A gilded cage on wheels, prettier than the one at the auction, but a cage nonetheless. Still, Naira climbed inside. The alternative was walking 4 days through wilderness in nothing but silk scraps and a borrowed cloak. The carriage lurched into motion, and Naira watched through the window as the auction house grew smaller behind them. Flames had begun to lick at its foundation. Apparently, the king believed in thorough destruction. Good. Her wolf growled with satisfaction. Let it burn. They traveled through the night and into the gray dawn of morning. Naira dozed fitfully, her dreams played by auction stages and golden cages and silver eyes that saw too much. When she woke fully, sunlight was streaming through the carriage windows, and they had stopped in a clearing beside a river. She stepped out to find the camp already bustling with activity. Soldiers watered horses. Cooks prepared breakfast over open fires. And at the river's edge, stripped to the waist, stood the king. Naira's breath caught. Water streamed down Draven's bare torso as he rose from his crouch by the riverbank. His body was a map of violence. Scars crisscrossing his back, his chest, his arms. Some were thin and surgical. Others were thick and ragged, souvenirs of wounds that should have killed him. But beneath the scars was raw power. Muscles carved from years of combat. A warrior's build honed to lethal perfection. He turned, sensing her gaze, and Naira forced herself not to look away. See something interesting, little flame? His voice carried easily across the distance. I see a man with more scars than sense. She approached the riverbank, refusing to be intimidated. Did you fight every battle yourself, or only the ones that would leave marks? Only the important ones. Draven pulled on a fresh shirt, covering the evidence of his violent history. Sleep well. No, honest. He sounded almost pleased. Most people lie to me constantly. It becomes tedious. Most people are probably afraid you'll execute them for speaking the truth. Most people are correct to be afraid. He began walking toward the central campfire, clearly expecting her to follow. But you're not most people. Are you Naira of no house? She fell into step beside him, hyper-aware of how small she felt next to his towering frame. You still haven't told me what you want from me. I want many things. He accepted a plate of food from a cook, then handed it to her, without taking one for himself. Eat. You're too thin. Naira looked at the plate. Roasted meat, fresh bread, dried fruit. Her stomach growled traitorously. Answers first. Food second. Draven's silver eyes studied her for a long moment. Around them, soldiers pretended not to watch the exchange while clearly watching every second. Very well. He gestured toward a fallen log near the fire. Sit, and I will tell you about the war that's coming. Naira sat, and the king began to speak. 3 kingdoms border mine, Draven began, his silver eyes fixed on the flames. Valdros the north, ruled by King Aldric, a man whose cruelty makes mine look like kindness. Thornwood territory to the east, where your rejected mate's family holds power under the Banner Lords. And Ashenmoor to the west, a kingdom ruled by Seraphina the Pale. Naira listened, the untouched plate of food growing cold in her lap. She knew the basic geography. Of course, everyone did. But hearing the bloodied king speak of neighboring rulers like chess pieces on a board felt different, more dangerous. For decades, these kingdoms maintained an uneasy peace, Draven continued. Trade agreements, political marriages, occasional border skirmishes that never escalated beyond posturing. But 6 months ago, everything changed. What happened 6 months ago? Draven's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. My sister was murdered. The words hung in the morning air. Naira hadn't known he had a sister. The stories about the bloodied king never mentioned family. Only death, conquest, and a throne built on bones. Princess Isolde was traveling to Valdros for diplomatic negotiations. Her convoy was ambushed in neutral territory. 40 soldiers, 12 servants, and 1 princess, all slaughtered. Their bodies were arranged in a pattern. A message. What message? That war is coming. That someone wanted desperately enough to murder a princess and frame another kingdom for the crime. Naira's mind raced. Frame? You don't believe Valdros was responsible. Aldrich is a monster, but he's not a fool. Killing my sister would guarantee annihilation. He has nothing to gain from open war with Shadowvale. Draven finally looked at her, and the grief buried beneath his cold exterior flickered briefly visible. Someone else orchestrated this. Someone hiding in the shadows, manipulating kingdoms like puppets. And you want to find them. I want to destroy them. The words were spoken with such quiet certainty that Naira felt a chill run down her spine. But first, I need to understand who they are, what they want, how deep their roots have spread. The fire crackled between them. Soldiers moved about the camp, but no one approached the king and his strange companion. They existed in a bubble of private conversation that none dared penetrate. What does any of this have to do with me? Naira finally asked. I'm nobody. An Omega from the lower district with no house, no connections, no power. I can't help you find shadow conspirators. Draven's lips curved slightly. Can't you? Is this a riddle? Because I'm not in the mood for games. No games. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Tell me, little flame, when you stood in that auction hall, what did you see? Naira frowned. Wealthy alphas buying omegas like livestock. Look deeper. Who were they? What did you notice about them? She thought back, pushing past the fear and revulsion to access the memories her wolf had cataloged. The man in the front row, the one who bid first. He wore the seal of House Varen on his ring. But House Varen was disgraced 2 years ago. They shouldn't have that kind of gold anymore. Her eyes widened as realization struck. Unless someone is funding them secretly. Continue. The auctioneer deferred to someone in the back corner, a woman in a green veil. She never bid, but he kept looking at her for approval. Naira's wolf stirred, memories sharpening. And there were guards at the exits who didn't match the slavers' usual thugs. Professional soldiers, military trained. Draven nodded slowly, something like satisfaction flickering in his silver eyes. In 10 minutes of observation, you notice what my intelligence officers missed in 3 weeks of investigation. I noticed things. Naira shrugged, uncomfortable with his scrutiny. Omegas learn to watch. It's how we survive. It's how the exceptional ones survive, Draven corrected. Most Omegas learn to bow, to submit, to make themselves invisible and hope the danger passes them by. You learn to study, to analyze, to understand the predators around you. Fat lot of good it did me. I still ended up on an auction block. Through no failure of your own. Draven rose to his full height, and Naira had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You were drugged, outnumbered, and taken by surprise. Even then, you fought back hard enough to draw blood. That's not weakness. That's survival against overwhelming odds. Naira didn't know how to respond. No one had ever framed her capture as anything other than failure. Even she had blamed herself for venturing too close to the forest. I need eyes and ears in places my soldiers cannot go, Draven said. Drawing rooms and ballrooms, noble estates and ladies' chambers. The shadow conspiracy reaches into courts and councils, and it uses the invisible networks that exist between Omegas. Understanding dawned cold and heavy. You wanted to spy for you. I want you to listen, to watch, to tell me what you observe. He tilted his head. The same skills that help you survive your rejection, that helped you notice details at the auction, that would have helped you escape the slavers if not for the drug. Those skills have value. I'm offering you the chance to use them. And in exchange, training, protection, purpose. His silver eyes bore into hers. And eventually, if you prove yourself, power. The word was intoxicating. Omegas weren't supposed to want power. They were supposed to want mates and pups and comfortable cages decorated with domesticity. But Naira had never wanted what she was supposed to want. What kind of power? She asked carefully. Draven smiled. Actually smiled, and it transformed his face from terrifying to devastating. The kind that makes rejected mates regret their foolishness. The kind that makes slavers fear to speak your name. The kind that lets you burn every cage that ever tried to hold you. Naira's wolf stirred with something that felt dangerously like hope. When do we start? The next 2 days passed in a rhythm Naira hadn't expected. Almost peaceful, if peace could exist in the shadow of the bloody king. She rode in the carriage during the coldest hours, but increasingly found herself walking alongside the convoy or riding a borrowed mare. Her muscles ached from the unaccustomed exercise, but the ache felt good, real, like her body was waking from a long sleep. Draven made no further demands on her time after their conversation by the fire. He rode at the head of the column, a dark figure on a massive black stallion, consulting with Commander Sarah and occasionally disappearing ahead to scout the road. But Naira felt his eyes on her. Every time she emerged from the carriage, his silver gaze would find her. Every time she stumbled on the rough terrain, he would be watching, not with the hungry possessiveness of the auction bidders. Something different, something that made her wolf pace restlessly beneath her skin. On the third night, they made camp in a narrow valley between 2 hills. The location made Naira's wolf uneasy, hackles rising at the confined space. We should have camped on higher ground, she muttered to herself, surveying the surrounding hills. Observant, she spun to find Draven behind her, silent as a shadow despite his size. How did a man that large move so quietly? You disagree with my commander's choice of campsite, he said. It wasn't a question. I'm not a military strategist. No, but your wolf knows what your mind hasn't yet learned to articulate. He stood beside her, looking up at the hills. This valley is a trap waiting to be sprung. Any enemy holding the high ground could rain arrows upon us. Then why did you camp here? Draven's smile was cold. Because I want to see who springs the trap. Before Naira could process his words, a horn blast shattered the night. Arrows fell from the darkness like deadly rain. Down! Draven's arm swept around her waist, pulling her against his chest as he twisted, using his own body as a shield. She heard the thud of arrows striking his flesh, and his grunt of pain. Then chaos erupted. Soldiers scrambled for weapons. Horses screamed. Dark figures poured down the hillside, their faces covered with black cloth, weapons gleaming in the firelight. Draven thrust her behind a supply wagon. Stay here. You're wounded. Stay. Here. He didn't wait for her agreement. He drew his sword, a massive blade that required 2 hands from any other man, and waded into the battle like death itself. Naira had never seen anything like it. The bloodied king fought with brutal efficiency, each movement precise and devastating. Attackers fell before him like wheat before a scythe. His silver eyes gleamed with something feral, something that spoke of the wolf beneath the man's skin. But even he couldn't be everywhere. A figure broke through the line of soldiers, sprinting toward Naira's hiding spot. Black cloth covered his face, but she could see his eyes, cold, calculating, fixed on her with predatory intent. They're not here for the king, her wolf realized with sudden clarity. They're here for us. Naira's hand found a discarded sword on the ground. Too heavy for her, poorly balanced, but better than nothing. The attacker lunged. She parried, barely. The impact jarred her arms to the shoulders. He was stronger, faster, trained in ways she wasn't. His second strike sent the sword spinning from her grip. His hand closed around her throat. "The shadow sends regards," he hissed. Black spots danced in her vision. Her wolf howled in desperate fury. No, something deep inside her snapped. Heat erupted from her core, not the normal warmth of her wolf, but something older, rawer. The attacker's eyes widened as his hand began to smoke against her skin. He screamed, releasing her, stumbling backward. His palm was burned, branded with a mark that looked like flames. What are you?" he gasped. Naira didn't know. She didn't understand what had just happened, why her skin had turned to fire, why the heat was still building inside her chest like a storm waiting to break. Then Draven was there. His sword took the attacker's head in a single clean stroke. "Naira." His voice was sharp, commanding. "Look at me." She couldn't. The heat was too much, spreading through her veins, threatening to consume her from inside. "Look at me." His hands cupped her face, and the heat didn't burn him, where it seared the attacker's flesh. It merely warmed Draven's palms. His silver eyes locked onto her amber ones, and something in his gaze anchored her. "Breathe," he commanded, slow and deep. "Match my rhythm." She tried to focus on his chest rising and falling, his hand steady against her cheeks, the storm inside her still raging. "That's it. You're safe. The fire answers to you, not the other way around. Tell it to sleep." Sleep, she thought desperately. Please, please sleep. Slowly, impossibly, the heat receded. The inferno banked itself to embers, then to warmth, then to nothing. Naira sagged against Draven's chest, exhausted in ways she'd never experienced. "What happened to me?" she whispered. Draven's arms wrapped around her, supporting rather than trapping. When he spoke, his voice was rough with something she couldn't name. An old bloodline, one that hasn't manifested in generations. He pulled back to study her face, and for the first time, she saw uncertainty in his expression. "Your flame-touched Naira, a fire-blessed Omega. I don't understand." "Neither do I. Not fully." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, the gesture unexpectedly tender. "But the Shadow Conspiracy clearly does. They sent assassins for you specifically, which means they know what you are, even if you don't." The implications crashed over her like cold water. "They knew I'd be here. With you." Draven nodded grimly. "We have a spy in our ranks." Around them, soldiers secured the camp, tending to wounded and collecting enemy dead. The ambush was over, but the true battle, Naira realized, had just begun. "Welcome to Shadowvale's war, little flame," Draven murmured. "It seems you've been part of it longer than either of us knew." They didn't sleep that night. The dead were counted. 7 soldiers lost, 23 attackers killed. The wounded were tended, arrows removed from flesh, wounds stitched by torchlight. 3 of the enemy had been captured alive, bound and gagged in a supply wagon for interrogation later. Naira sat apart from the chaos, wrapped in Draven's cloak once more, staring at her hands. They looked the same as always. Slender fingers, callous palms from months of grinding herbs. Nothing special. Nothing that suggested she could burn a man's flesh with a touch. Flame-touched. The words echoed in her mind, foreign and frightening. "You should rest." Commander Sarah appeared beside her, a cup of something warm pressed into Naira's trembling hands. "The king has ordered a forced march to Shadowvale. We'll reach the capital by tomorrow evening. He's wounded." Naira had seen the arrow strike him, had heard his grunt of pain. He should rest. Sarah's expression flickered with something like surprise. "His Majesty has survived worse. The arrows didn't hit anything vital. That doesn't mean he should ignore them. You're concerned for him." It wasn't a question, but Naira heard the curiosity beneath the words. She didn't know how to answer. Was she concerned? The man was a monster by all accounts, a king who had killed his own father, who ruled through fear and violence. But he'd used his body to shield hers. He'd talked her down from the fire, consuming her from within. He'd touched her burning skin, without flinching. I'm concerned for my own survival, Naira said finally. If he dies, I doubt his soldiers will honor whatever arrangement we've made. Sarah studied her for a long moment. You truly don't see it, do you? See what? The way he watches you. The way he shielded you without hesitation. Sarah's voice dropped lower. In 15 years of service, I've never seen King Draven take an arrow for anyone. Not his generals. Not his advisors. Not even his sister. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling outward into implications Naira wasn't ready to examine. He needs me for his spy network, she said. I'm an investment. Keep telling yourself that. Sarah straightened, her expression returning to its usual severity. Rest while you can. Tomorrow, everything changes. Dawn painted the sky in shades of blood and gold, an ominous palette that matched Naira's churning thoughts. The march to Shadowvale was grueling. Soldiers who had fought through the night now pushed forward on minimal sleep, driven by their king's relentless pace. Naira rode in the carriage, but rest eluded her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flames. Midday brought a brief respite. The convoy stopped near a stream to water the horses, and Naira took the opportunity to stretch her aching limbs. Walk with me. Draven's voice startled her. She hadn't heard him approach. Again. Do you enjoy sneaking up on people? She demanded. Immensely. He gestured toward a copse of trees away from the main group. We need to discuss what happened last night. They walked in silence until the sounds of the camp faded behind them. The trees provided privacy, dappled sunlight filtering through leaves to create patterns on the forest floor. Fire-blessed Omegas haven't existed for nearly a century. Draven began without preamble. The bloodline was thought to be extinct, wiped out during the Purging Wars. The Purging Wars? Naira had heard the name in whisper histories, but details were scarce. Before my grandfather's time, those with elemental gifts were hunted. Fire-blessed, storm-touched, earthsingers, all were systematically slaughtered by a coalition of kingdoms who feared their power. Draven's jaw tightened. The coalition claimed they were protecting the natural order. In truth, they were eliminating threats to their control. And you think I'm descended from survivors? It's the only explanation. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The flame recognized you last night. It answered your call. That kind of power doesn't manifest from nothing. Naira thought of her mother, sweet, tired, working her fingers to the bone in the textile factories. Her grandmother, who had died before Naira's 5th birthday. Ordinary women leading ordinary lives. My family were laborers. Seamstresses and factory workers going back generations. No nobles, no warriors, no one special. Perhaps that's what the survivors wanted everyone to believe. Draven stepped closer, and Naira's wolf stirred at his proximity. Hidden in plain sight, their gifts dormant, waiting for the right trigger to awaken. What trigger? Strong emotion, life-threatening danger. Sometimes, his silver eyes darkened. Sometimes proximity to a compatible alpha. The implication hung between them like smoke. You think you triggered this? I think the timing is suspicious. He raised a hand, hesitating briefly before brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was featherlight, yet it sent sparks cascading down her spine. I also think our enemies knew this would happen. They sent assassins specifically for you, not for me. The shadow you spoke of. They've been watching you, perhaps for years. His expression hardened, which means someone close to you reported your existence. Your rejection at Thornwood was public. It drew attention to an Omega who should have remained invisible. Caston's face flashed through her mind. His cold green eyes. His public humiliation. You think the rejection was orchestrated? I think nothing about your life has been a coincidence. Draven's hand dropped to her shoulder, gripping firmly. Think, Naira, before the ceremony. Did anything unusual happen? Anyone new in your life? Strange questions about your family history. She tried to remember those final weeks before the rejection, the excitement of preparing for the ceremony, the nervous anticipation of meeting her fated mate, and then a detail she'd forgotten until now. A healer came to our home, she said slowly. 3 weeks before the ceremony. She said it was a routine health assessment for Omega's approaching mating age. She took blood samples. Draven went very still. What did she look like? Middle-aged, brown hair with gray streaks, a scar on her left hand, shaped like a crescent. Something dangerous flickered in the king's eyes. Maeve. Her name is Maeve, and she's not a healer. She's an information broker who sells to the highest bidder. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. They tested my blood. They knew what I was before I did. Naira's voice shook with fury. They arranged a rejection. The whispers that drove me from Varkros, the slavers who captured me, all was designed to lead me somewhere. To the auction, Draven confirmed grimly, where someone was waiting to purchase a flame-blessed Omega for their own purposes. But you got there first. By sheer luck. His grip on her shoulder tightened. Or perhaps by fate, if you believe in such things. Naira laughed bitterly. Fate made my mate reject me publicly. I'm not inclined to trust it. Then trust this. Draven leaned closer, his breath warm against her forehead. I will find everyone responsible for what was done to you, and I will make them burn. The promise should have frightened her. Instead, it kindled something warm in her chest, something that had nothing to do with her newfound fire. Teach me, she whispered. Teach me to control the flames, to use them. Draven's smile was sharp as a blade. With pleasure, little flame. Shadowvale rose from the mist like a dark dream given form. Naira pressed her face to the carriage window, unable to look away as the capital city of King Draven's realm revealed itself. She had expected something harsh, black stone walls, iron spikes, the oppressive architecture of a tyrant's domain. What she found was breathtaking. The city sprawled across a valley nestled between two mountain ranges, their peaks dusted with eternal snow. Towers of dark gray stone spiraled toward the sky, but they were softened by climbing ivy and flowering vines. Bridges arched gracefully between buildings, decorated with silver filigree that caught the fading sunlight. And at the valley's heart, rising above everything else, stood the palace. Castle Kaler was carved directly into the mountainside, part fortress, part natural wonder. Waterfalls cascaded down its eastern face, feeding into canals that wound through the city streets. Windows glittered like scattered stars, and at its peak, a great silver flame burned in a brazier visible for miles. Not what you expected? Draven's voice came from beside the carriage. He rode his black stallion close enough to the window that she could see the amusement playing at his lips. Stories describe Shadowvale as a city of darkness and death. Stories are told by my enemies. He guided his horse closer still. What do your own eyes tell you? Naira watched as they passed through the main gates. Citizens lined the streets, not cowering in fear, but waving, cheering, throwing flowers before the king's procession. Children sat on parents' shoulders to catch a glimpse of their ruler. Merchants paused their trade to bow respectfully. These were not the actions of people living under a tyrant's heel. My eyes tell me I've been lied to, she admitted. Everyone's been lied to, little flame. The question is what you do once you discover the truth. The carriage continued through winding streets, climbing steadily toward the palace. Naira caught glimpses of daily life. A market square bustling with activity, a temple with its doors open wide, children playing in a fountain spray. It looked almost happy. If you rule so well, why do other kingdoms paint you as a monster? Draven's expression hardened. Because 15 years ago, I killed my father and claimed his throne. That act, regardless of context, will forever define me in their eyes. What was the context? He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. My father was the true monster. What he did to my mother, my sister, the people of this kingdom. A muscle twitched in his jaw. The stories about Shadowvale's darkness weren't always lies. Under his reign, the city earned every terrible name it was called. And you changed it. I tried. I'm still trying. He met her eyes, and she saw exhaustion buried beneath the steel. Some days I wonder if the blood on my hands will ever wash clean. Before Naira could respond, the carriage passed through the palace gates. Castle Kaler was even more impressive up close. Servants rushed to attend the king's convoy, their movements efficient but not fearful. Stable hands took charge of horses. Stewards appeared to direct wounded soldiers toward the infirmary. Commander Sarah helped Naira from the carriage, steadying her when her cramped legs threatened to buckle. "Welcome to your new home," the commander said. "Try not to get lost. The castle has over 300 rooms, and some of the older passages aren't on any map." Reassuring. A thin smile cracked Sarah's severe expression. "I'll assign you a guide for the first few weeks. In the meantime, the king has requested you join him for dinner once you've refreshed yourself." Requested or commanded? With His Majesty, there's rarely a difference. Sarah gestured toward a waiting servant, a young Beta woman with kind eyes. "Mira will show you to your chambers." Naira followed the servant into the palace, her head swiveling constantly as she tried to absorb her surroundings. Vaulted ceilings painted with celestial scenes, tapestries depicting battles and coronations, armor displays and weapon collections, and more wealth in a single hallway than her entire childhood home had seen in generations. "Your chambers are in the east wing, my lady," Mira explained as they climbed the spiral staircase. "You'll have a view of the sunrise gardens." "I'm not a lady." Mira glanced back with a puzzled smile. "The king has granted you noble guest status. That makes you a lady in all the ways that matter within these walls." Noble guest status. Another unexpected twist in this strange new reality. They stopped before an ornate door carved with roses and thorns. Mira pushed it open and stepped aside. Naira's breath caught. The chambers were larger than the entire apartment she'd shared with her mother and sisters. A sitting room with plush furniture faced tall windows overlooking gardens in full bloom. Through an archway, she glimpsed a bedroom with a bed large enough to fit 6 people. Another door revealed a private bathing chamber with a stone tub already filled with steaming, rose-scented water. "This can't be for me." The king was quite specific. Mira moved through the space, opening wardrobes to reveal hanging gowns in every color imaginable. He ordered a complete wardrobe prepared in your size. "Meals will be brought to your chambers unless you're dining elsewhere." "And this." She pressed a small silver bell into Naira's palm. "Ring if you need anything at all." Naira stared at the bell, at the gowns, at the overwhelming luxury surrounding her. "Why?" she whispered. "Why is he doing all this?" Myra's expression softened. "That's not my place to say, my lady. But I've served in this castle for 10 years, and I've never seen the king take such personal interest in anyone." She curtsied and withdrew, leaving Naira alone with her confusion. The bath was heavenly. Hot water soothing muscles she hadn't realized were aching, rose oil softening skin roughened by months of labor. Naira soaked until her fingers pruned, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. A week ago, she'd been gathering herbs in a meadow. Now she was bathing in a king's palace, wearing noble status like a borrowed dress, preparing to dine with the most feared ruler in all the kingdoms. "And apparently, I can set people on fire with my bare hands," she reminded herself. Can't forget that delightful detail. Her wolf stirred, restless and alert. Something was changing inside her, not just a fire, but something deeper. The bone-deep resignation that had settled over her after Cashin's rejection was cracking, falling away like dead skin. In its place, something new was growing, something that felt dangerously like power. Naira rose from the bath and dressed carefully, choosing a gown of deep burgundy that reminded her of the crimson dress she'd worn to the claiming ceremony. That night had ended in humiliation. Perhaps this one would be different. A knock came at her door precisely as the sun touched the horizon. She opened it to find Draven himself waiting. Not a servant, not a guard, but the king. He'd changed from his traveling clothes into a fitted black jacket with silver embroidery. His dark hair was damp from his own bath, brushing his collar. He looked devastating. "You could have sent a servant to escort me," Naira said, proud that her voice remained steady. "I could have." His silver eyes traveled over her, appreciation evident in their depths. "But I find I prefer your company to theirs." He offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, Naira took it. The private dining chamber was intimate compared to the grandeur Naira had witnessed throughout the castle. A single table set for two, candles casting warm shadows across stone walls, windows open to night breeze carrying the scent of mountain flowers. Draven held her chair, a gesture so unexpectedly genteel that Naira nearly stumbled. "You seem surprised," he observed, taking his own seat across from her. "The bloodied king has table manners. Forgive me for not expecting chivalry from a man rumored to eat his enemies' hearts." Draven's laugh was unexpected, deep and genuine, transforming his severe features into something approaching handsome. "I've never eaten anyone's heart. The logistics alone would be impractical. Good to know you considered it. A king must consider everything." Servants appeared with the first course, a delicate soup that tasted of herbs Naira couldn't name. She ate carefully, hyper-aware of Draven's gaze upon her. "You have questions," he said. "I can see them burning behind your eyes." "I have hundreds of questions. I don't know where to start." "Then I'll start for you." He set down his spoon, giving her his full attention. "You want to know why I'm treating you like a noble guest instead of a spy in training. You want to know why I shielded you with my own body. You want to know what I truly want from you." Naira's heart hammered. "Yes, all of that." Draven was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher than she'd heard before. "When I saw you on that auction stage, I felt something I haven't experienced in 15 years. Something I thought I'd burn out myself along with my father's legacy." His silver eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. Recognition? Recognition of what? Of fire. He leaned forward. "Not the flame-blessed gift sleeping in your blood. I didn't know about that until last night. I mean the fire in your spirit. The way you stood before those bidding vultures with your head high and your eyes blazing. The way you refused to be broken despite everything designed to shatter you." Naira's throat tightened. "I was terrified. Terror and courage aren't opposites. They're partners." Draven's hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. "The bravest people I've known were always the most afraid. They simply refused to let fear win. Is that why you intervened? Because you admire my courage?" "Partly." His fingers brushed her knuckles, the lightest touch, yet sent electricity sparking up her arm. "And partly because something in my wolf demanded I protect you. A compulsion I couldn't explain or ignore." Naira's breath caught. Her own wolf was stirring, pressing against her consciousness with sudden urgency. "Mate," her wolf whispered. "He smells like mate." No, that was impossible. She felt a mate bond with Cassian, that golden thread connecting their souls. It had been severed, torn, destroyed. She couldn't have another fated mate. Could she? "I see you begin to understand," Draven said quietly. "The confusion you're feeling. The inexplicable pull. This doesn't make sense." Naira pulled her hand back, standing abruptly. "Castian was my fated mate. The bond was real. I felt it snap into place. I felt it tear when he rejected me. The Thornwood heir was never your true mate." Draven rose as well, circling the table with predatory grace. "What you felt was a manufactured connection, blood magic designed to mimic the mate bond. That's impossible." "Is it?" He stopped before her, close enough to touch but holding himself back. "You told me a healer took blood samples 3 weeks before your ceremony. Blood magic requires blood. The shadow conspiracy created a false bond between you and Castian, knowing he would reject you, knowing the public humiliation would drive you from Varkros. But why? What purpose could that possibly serve? To break you, to isolate you, to make you desperate enough to lower your guard." His jaw tightened. "And to ensure you never discovered your true mate, the one whose existence threatened their plans." The implications crashed over her like icy waves. "You," she breathed. "They were trying to keep me from you." The flame-blessed bloodline in the Kalar dynasty had been intertwined for centuries. Legends speak of fire omegas who bonded with shadow alphas, creating unions of unprecedented power. Draven's voice dropped to nearly a whisper. "The shadow conspiracy has been hunting those bloodlines for 100 years, exterminating them, preventing any chance of that ancient power rising again. But they missed me. They missed you, hidden among laborers and seamstresses, your gift dormant, your destiny obscured. His hand rose to cup her cheek, and this time she didn't pull away, until fate intervened. Naira's wolf was howling now, straining toward this man, this king, this monster, this unexpected salvation. The fire in her blood responded to his touch, warming rather than burning. "I don't know if I can trust fate," she whispered. "Fate has only ever betrayed me." "Then don't trust fate. Trust what you feel." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Trust the fire that answers my call as easily as yours. Trust the wolf inside you that recognizes its true partner. And if I'm wrong, if this is another manufactured bond designed to control me, then I will let you go." The word seemed to cost him something, a flash of pain in those silver eyes. "I will not cage you, Naira. Not ever. If you choose to leave Shadowvale tomorrow, I will provide you with gold, protection, and safe passage to wherever you wish to go. You would let me walk away? It would destroy something in me to watch you go." His honesty was brutal, raw. "But I would rather be destroyed than become another man who trapped you against your will." Tears pricked at Naira's eyes. After Cashin's rejection, she believed herself incapable of being wanted, unworthy of being chosen. A curse-blessed Omega with too much fire and not enough submission. But Draven wasn't asking her to submit. He was asking her to rise. "Teach me," she said, her voice stronger now. "Teach me to control the fire. Teach me to be the weapon you need against the shadow conspiracy. And teach me—" She stepped closer, eliminating the distance between them. "Teach me what it means to be truly wanted." Draven's control shattered. His mouth claimed hers with a hunger that stole her breath. The kiss was fire and shadow, burning and consuming. Naira's flame surged to meet him, wrapping around them both in a cocoon of warmth that should have been terrifying, but felt instead like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Naira saw her own wonder reflected in Draven's silver eyes. "This is only the beginning," he warned. "The shadow conspiracy will not rest. They will send assassins, spies, armies. They will try to tear us apart, as they tore apart generations before us. Let them try." Naira's smile was fierce. "They made a fatal mistake when they tried to break me. They made an even greater one when they tried to keep me from you. And what will you do now, little flame?" Naira reached up to trace the scar along his jaw. This evidence of battle survived, of a man who had walked through darkness and emerged still fighting. "Now," she said, "I'm burning." Far away, in a chamber lit by cold blue light, a figure received the news of the failed ambush. The spy's report was detailed. The flame-blessed Omega had awakened. The Kalar King had claimed her, and the prophecy they'd spent a century trying to prevent was unfolding despite their efforts. "Send word to the other kingdoms," the figure commanded. "The Shadow War has entered its final phase. And the girl, she must die, along with the bloodied king." The figure smiled coldly. "But first, let them believe they've won. Let them grow comfortable. Let them fall in love. And then we burn everything they hold dear and watch them choke on the ashes of their hope." Naira knew none of this as she stood in Draven's arms, her wolf singing with joy, her fire blazing with purpose. She knew only that for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be, not as a rejected Omega, not as a slave awaiting auction, but as a flame that would illuminate the darkness. And when the shadows came, as she knew they would, she would be ready. This is not the end, she promised herself as Draven kissed her once more. This is where my true story begins. I am Naira, flame-blessed and fate-claimed. I am loved by a king and hunted by shadows. And I will burn so bright that even the darkness fears my name.